Today, we're talking about what head coach Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels had to say at practice today. We're also going to be talking about one key to victory for the Washington Commanders as they get set to take on the Chicago Bears. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jayden Daniels is going to be hitting Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about what head coach Dan Quinn and then Jayden Daniels had to say at practice today. And so starting with head coach Dan Quinn, this is what he had to say before practice. And so again, just paraphrasing this for Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels. If you want to look at their interview in full, you can head over to the Commanders YouTube page and check it out there. But with Dan Quinn, the first thing that he talks about is really just wanting this team to continue to dig into the skill work and continue to improve. And so we know that Dan Quinn is always talking about doing the little things here and improving as a team. And so just wants the team to continue to do that. Next, he talked about the importance of just the home field and just really playing well there. So he talks about this. He says that he wants to be good at home and he wants to make it difficult on opponents. And he said that he's excited for the team to be home. And so hopefully we get, a good turnout here against the Chicago Bears, and it's extra noisy out there, making it tough on them. And so Dan Quinn did talk about home field advantage. And then the next thing that he talks about is he gives us some updates around some of these injured players. And so starting with Sam Cosmi, we get a great update around him. So it looks like that he's headed to a full week of practice. And so we'll see what happens with Sam Cosmi if he does eventually play here against the Chicago Bears, especially with this extra day on Monday night. I would say that if not this week, hopefully next week. And so we'll see what happens there, but things trending in the right direction for Sam Cosmi. Next, it sounds like that it's trending in the right direction here for also to Noah Brown. And so with Noah Brown, he says that he will be out at practice today. And so I think that is a good sign that Noah Brown is going to be back at practice. Obviously, we'll find out some more about him, come Friday, I'm sure, when we get another update. But the good thing is that he says that Noah Brown will be out there at practice. Next, he talked about Terry McLaurin, and he says that Terry McLaurin would not be at practice today. And he said with the extra day, he said that that's something that the team would give an update on. And so, let's see what happens with Terry McLaurin. The good thing about, all of these players that are on the injury report heading into this game is that they do get the extra day. And so hopefully we do get a chance to see all three players out there. But that is the latest update that we got from Dan Quinn around these injured players. And then next, Dan Quinn gives us a little bit of insight as to just really what the mindset is for the team going into this game, because I think that, the narrative around this game is obviously what happened last season with the Hail Mary. And then when you look at the fact that Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams, that was 1-2 in the NFL draft when Jayden Daniels came out. And so there's obviously going to be a lot of talk about that. But I love what Coach Dan Quinn talks about just with the whole Hail Mary situation. And he was like, look, the Hail Mary was last year's story, for that last year's team, and it has nothing to do with this year. And so, he addressed the team about that. And then also, too, he talks about just really one of the things that stood out from last year's win against the Chicago Bears and that moment. And actually, two things came to mind for him. And so one, he talked about Jayden Daniels showing the toughness because he was a little banged up and getting back out there and going against the Chicago Bears and getting the win there. And then next, he just talked about the belief of the team in that moment, too, as well. And so both of those things really stood out from last season. But he wanted to make it clear that, look, that was last year's story, that had to do with last year's team as far as the Hail Mary. And so next, going ahead and talking about what Jayden Daniels had to say after practice here. And so I think that Jayden Daniels kind of mimics a lot of what Dan Quinn is talking about as far as just really where the mindset is of the team, because one of the things that just really I think was key out of his presser today was he was like, look, the Hail Mary from last year will not help the Commanders win this game in Monday night. And so I love that, with Jayden Daniels talking about that. And he had zero, I mean, absolutely zero care of the drafting position with Caleb Williams and himself. He was like, look, Caleb Williams was number one. I was number two. We have zero control over that, and it does not matter. And so, again, that just kind of lets you know the mindset of this team going into this game. Again, we're going to hear a lot of talk about that, but it seems like that Dan Quinn focused on the right now, and then Jayden Daniels as well. And in fact, one of the other things that Jayden Daniels talks about is really just controlling what he can control and just making sure that you get locked in on the process versus the results. And so I love that with Jayden Daniels, just really attacking the things that's in front of you. He is asked about some of his playmakers. And so he's asked about Deebo Samuel and just really his impact. And he says this about Deebo Samuel. He says that, look, he's doing everything that he did when he was with the San Francisco 49ers and just finding a way to get involved. And yeah, I think that that's absolutely accurate. I think that Deebo Samuel has just found a way to be really an impact for this team. And I think that the way that Deebo Samuel has done it as a wide receiver, that's been actually great the way that he's done it, because you know that he's coming, but teams still haven't found a way to stop it. And in fact, when you go back and you look at what he was able to do in this last game out, he had 11 targets. And, he caught, I believe, 8 of those targets. And this is a player that he was the one that made the most noise as a wide receiver. Everybody else made a catch. And to everybody else's, credit that made the catch in that game against the Chargers game, it was a huge catch, because those catches led to, big moments in the game where it was like a first down conversion, or, just got drive started on like the last drive down the field and stuff like that. And so it was all huge. But Deebo Samuel, look, he did the heavy lifting there as far as a wide receiver, and then also too just continues to make plays for this team. And so talking about Deebo Samuel next, he talks about Jacory Croskey-Merritt here, a.k.a. Bill. And so with him, he's asked about just when did you know that Bill was as good as advertised here. And he just talked about the fact that, look, Bill making the plays in preseason, that was huge for this team. And so the fact that he was able to step up, and just that was really the moment that he knew that Bill was Bill, as we're seeing him right now make plays and things like that. And so lastly, he talks about Luke McCaffrey, and he talks about Luke McCaffrey being a player that this season, he's just been a lot more decisive and just really understanding what he needs to do as a wide receiver. Jayden Daniels talks about the fact that he is kind of looking at things from the lens of a quarterback, because yes, Luke McCaffrey was a quarterback in college. And so I think that that's something that's paying off. And so just talking about how he's getting out of his routes and just getting these game reps and things like that, it's all, playing in the favor of Luke McCaffrey kind of stepping up this season. And so giving Luke McCaffrey some praise here. And so that was what Jayden Daniels had to say about all those players. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into one key that the Commanders are going to have to do in order to beat the Chicago Bears coming up here on Monday night. And so I think that the one thing that stands out here for the Washington Commanders and what they're going to have to do is really attack the Bears defense on the ground. One of the questions that was asked in the press conference to Dan Quinn before practice was this. He's asked about the Commanders leading the league in rushing, but they're 28th in time of possession. And also, too, they're struggling to convert third downs. And so that just made me think that, what the Commanders are going to have to do is get to their strength. And I think by getting to their strength here, this is going to help them with their third down conversion. And it's also going to help them with their time of possession. And I think that this is something that they're going to have to just really build off of. But it starts with running the football, because clearly this season, it's about running the ball and then going from there. And so the Bears coming into this really struggle as far as stopping the run. In fact, they are 32nd in the league as far as yards per carry at 6.1 a carry. And then against quarterbacks, they're 32nd there at 8.9 yards per carry. And so what's interesting about the Bears defense is that they are first in third down defense. And so I think the way that the Commanders are able to really minimize just how good the Bears are on third down is running the football and just making it to where the third down marker is that much more closer, excuse me, to go ahead and get to. And so I think that when you're looking at Jacory, Croskey-Merritt, you look at Chris Rodriguez Jr., you look at Jayden Daniels and what they can do in the running game. If they can get into situations where they're looking at 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 1 versus like 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6. I think that that is the way that they're able to go ahead and convert some third downs in this game and start to get that conversion, in the favor of the team here for the rest of the season. And then also, too, I think that you can put the Chicago Bears in a very difficult situation. I think that the more yards that you have to get to that third down marker, the better off it is going to be for the Bears to stop you. And I just think that the way that the Commanders are running the ball as far as just moving furniture, so to speak, and moving people out of the way, that's probably what you want to lean on, especially on a defense really that has struggled. And just how much have they struggled, in comparison to a team that both teams have played. And I'm talking about the Raiders here. When you look at Ashton Jeanty, who really, I think he struggled until this last week here. Against the Commanders, he had 17 carries for 63 yards, a 3.7 average. He had no touchdowns. But against the Bears, like I said, who have struggled against the run, in the last game out against the Bears, Ashton Jeanty had 21 carries, 138 yards. He had a 6.6 average, and he had a touchdown. And so the best day that he's had as a professional. And so I just think that, look, the Commanders need to lean in on this. They need to punish that defense. And you're also going to keep Caleb Williams off the field, which he's actually been pretty good here on the offensive side of the ball, which we'll talk about that in some more videos. But that is the first key to victory for the Washington Commanders, is lean in on your strength, because as you do that, what's going to happen is that the Bears are going to have to bring additional players into the box. And even if they do not, you're going to be able to hold them a little bit more on your play fakes and just kind of open it up for some big plays down the field. And I just think by running the football too, another thing that you run into is that you may not have to have as many third down conversions that you have to worry about, because I think that when you saw this last game against the Chargers, it was only 7 times that the Commanders were in that situation. And I think mainly because one of the things that Dan Quinn talked about with this team is possibly them being more effective on first and second downs. And so I think by running the football early here, Cliff Kingsbury can get this offense in situations where they're winning on first and second down. You're not necessarily having to worry about these third down conversions because you're doing that. And then also too, this does play a little bit too on the defense as far as the time of possession, but just not allowing teams to have these long drives and stuff like that. I think that that's been, a situation at times for the Commanders defense, even though that they've been, I think, pretty stellar for the most part. But on the offensive side of the ball, you just got to be able to continue to stay on the field. It'll help the time of possession go up for the Commanders. You'll be able to wear down defenses. You keep that opposing offense off the field, and you also get your defense fresh as well. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what is one of your main keys going into this game against the Chicago Bears. Let me know too what you guys are thinking as far as the mindset of the team going into this one. So again, I think that Dan Quinn and then also to Jayden Daniels really talking about just similar situations as far as just really blocking out what happened last season with the Hail Mary. And then also too, just blocking out the noise that you are going to hear around this game, because you are going to hear, hey, this is Caleb Williams versus Jayden Daniels, 1 versus 2. You're going to hear about the Hail Mary and all the stuff like that. But at this point in time, both of these teams really need to focus, especially for the Washington Commanders, because, getting this win against the Chicago Bears would be huge. This would put you firmly behind the Eagles, who are now 4-1. You would be 4-2. And then for the Bears, look, if they lose this game, that's going to put them below 500. They need the win to kind of stay, afloat in a tough division over there, with the Packers and Lions and everything else. But again, this is going to be, I think an interesting game for both teams. And I think that last season, when you looked at last year's game, it was one of those kind of momentum builders for both teams, because I do think that the Commanders did move on with the belief after that game. And so I think that you could say that about them. And then for the Bears, look, it was tough for them after that loss. And so this could be one of those moments early on in the season here to see if the Commanders can get to their strength, if they can build some momentum and get this thing really turning in the right direction some more. And so let's see what happens with that. So anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, go Commanders. And I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.